On a hot summer night in 1969, at a house on a hill overlooking Los Angeles, some of the same girls who once sang sweetly about souls locked in harmony unleashed helter-skelter.
I ran her down, and I began to stab her.
Do you remember her screaming at you?
Yeah, I remember her saying, "I'm already dead."
The next morning, Jerry DeRosa was the first officer at the scene.
It was very quiet, and the only thing that I can recall hearing were the sounds of the flies that were on the bodies.
DeRosa was one of the first to try to comprehend the savagery that brought an end to the decade of love.
The words "pig" were written in this area in blood on the front door, and the door was ajar.
A mocking salute written with the blood of a beautiful young actress named Sharon Tate.
What did you see when you came in?
A large amount of rope that was on the floor. One end was around Sharon Tate's neck, and then it looped up over the rafters here, came back down to the floor. She's been stabbed multiple times.
The next night, more murder in another part of town. A wealthy businessman, Lino LaBianca, and his wife, Rosemary.
I knew that people would die. I knew that there would be killing.
In all, 7 people were butchered in the Tate LaBianca murders. When the killers were finally arrested, among them 2 young girls with long hair and wide eyes, who said they did it with joy for a man named Charles Manson. This is how we remember them, frozen in time, laughing at murder. The girls the prosecutor called mutants, monsters. Pat Krenwinkle is now 46 years old. Leslie Van Houten, 45. They have spent almost 25 years in prison living with what they did.
I think that the violence in us is somehow nurtured and brought out and brought forth. You know, it didn't happen overnight. He spent a lot of time taking middle-class girls and remolding them.
I only did what Charlie wanted. That was the whole thing.
I never told anybody to do anything other than what they wanted to do.
And if they wanted to do murder, that was okay
That was
with
none
you?
of my business, woman. I'm a convict. I'm an outlaw. I'm a rebel. I'm not a Sunday school teacher.
Charles Manson, now 60 years old, still wearing the swastika of defiance. His intensity a reminder of the power he once held over 2 ordinary girls from Southern California. Patricia Krenwinkle's father was an insurance agent, her mother a homemaker. She was the plain, quiet girl who got average grades and sang in the glee club. In the summer of 1967, Krenwinkle was an 18-year-old secretary living with her older half-sister and drifting into the new freedoms of the time.
I was smoking a lot of marijuana hash, and I had, at that time, I've already used acid a couple times.
Were you a bad girl?
No, I wasn't a bad girl. But at that time, drinking and using drugs did not seem unusual because I was doing it with my high school friends.
One afternoon, she visited a friend of her sister.
And Charlie was there, and he was playing the guitar. And so I was introduced to him there. He said he didn't have a place to stay, so my sister invited him to stay with us.
Clang, bang, clang, went the big iron door.
This is the voice of the man she met that day. Charles Manson, then age 32, amateur singer, songwriter, and ex-con.
9 other men in that cell.
Only 5.5 months earlier, he had walked out of prison after spending more than half his life behind bars. As a boy, he was booted around from foster homes to reform school. His mother had been in jail for robbery. His rap sheet included everything from forgery to pimping. For Charles Manson, Pat Krenwinkle was a very easy mark.
That night, we slept together, and I felt really loved by him. When we made love, all I remember is just crying and crying to this man because he said, "Oh, you're beautiful." I couldn't believe that. I just started crying.
You didn't believe that you were?
Oh, absolutely not. And then he would look at you and smile with somehow, I felt like, oh, I'm a part of this. I just started hanging on. I mean, it was like I couldn't believe that this wasn't real.
Your home is where you're happy.
2 days later, she quit her job and left with Manson to become part of the love generation he sang about.
What you are, 'cause you were just born to be.
It wasn't so strange in 1967 to drive a bus, to give up all your clothes, you know, and going around and talk peace. A lot of times where you might have had someone say, don't you think what you're doing is odd? Instead, we were always in places where people were saying, wow, can I join you?
Leave your whole life behind.
It became the in thing to become bizarre, to go against everything you'd ever been taught.
For Krenwinkle, that meant sharing Manson's bed with other girls, like the daughter of an aeronautical engineer, Lynette Squeaky Fromm.
It was awkward, but it easily became familiar.
Did you ever contact your parents?
No, I didn't. I was cutting off my past, and very almost systematically you start, in my own brain, it was like, I can't go back.
Leslie Van Houten was also becoming restless with the conventions of suburban middle-class life.
The homecoming princess who sang in the church choir.
Yeah,
Remember her?
yeah. A little. A little bit, yeah.
You had a good family life. There was trouble in the family
Yeah.
when your father left. But you had so much going for you then.
I seemed to want more living out of life than what was expected of young girls at that time. Drugs, sex, you know, breaking away from the norm.
A year after graduation, she heard about Charles Manson.
That he was like Christ, and he had the answers, and that I just really needed to go and meet him.
And when you first saw him?
For as twisted as it all got, you know, I really think that I felt that I had met someone that, by being around him, would have a positive change.
By 1968, Manson and about 25 followers were camping out on a ranch north of Los Angeles. They provided care for the 80-year-old owner and his horses in exchange for living space.
You don't call it a family, I know, but the group of you, what was the main thing that it was about with all of you?
One day at a time. We played a lot of music, we rode, we did a lot of things, but we lived today. We lived in the day and the now.
You could absolutely not talk about your past at all.
And one thing we didn't have is watches. And the whole idea was to let time disappear. There was no time.
We gave up our birthdays.
What you are seeing is rare footage taken of Manson's followers in 1969. The song is sung by some of Manson's girls. To them, life at the ranch seemed like a game. Liberate yourself, lose yourself in Charlotte.
It was so wonderful that it scared us.
One of his things was to stop you during the day, and he'd put your palms up to his, and then he'd move them in any direction that he could. Or he'd make a series of faces, and then you were supposed to try to keep up with them. And the whole thing was always geared toward just complete mirroring of him.
And they would sit as a group, naked, for countless hours taking acid trips. Manson would pass out the LSD and reinforce